I recently discovered a secret weapon. I believe it can transform any runner's performance, making them faster in an easier way than ever before. Imagine this, just as a skilled conductor orchestrates a symphony, there are several things that we must master if we want to run faster and surpass our previous records. But it's not just about speed and time, it's about unleashing our true potential. In this video, Lindsey and I will unravel the secret weapon and show you why following these principles is crucial. Think of it as the precise recipe that guarantees success. However, be warned, if you deviate from this formula, you won't experience the same incredible results. Let's look at why it's so important if you want to improve your performance. Okay, so Lindsey, we're going to be talking about speed today.
But before we get into that, Ntutu, let's really unpack what is truly speed. Like when we talk about speed, what is that? What's the concept?
So, we've got to remember that when we talk about speed, we're referring to sprinting speed. And here we're talking about maximum efforts. So these are usually events that are up to about 60 meters or about 7 seconds in total. And in reality, when we talk about distance running, we don't really deal with speed in the truest sense. I can give you an example. If you look at Usain Bolt's world record, he ran at about 37 kilometers per hour. Even a world-class middle distance runner running the mile is going to be running at about 25 kilometers per hour. So it's quite a lot slower than a sprinter would be. So we don't really talk about speed per se, but the concepts kind of apply, especially when we start talking about speed endurance.
Yes, and I think that's quite an important differentiation, because if someone comes to me and says we need to work on your speed, then I'm thinking, okay, are we going to do repeats of 60 meters and shorter? Exactly. And then, what is the practical implication for that in terms of distance running? So I think we are talking then really speed endurance, even on the shorter end of speed when we are working 5, 10 and marathon.
And again, the key thing is these concepts come from sprinting. And even speed endurance in the sprinting sense is the ability to hold near your maximum speed for a certain amount of time. But for us, we talk about speed endurance more as in how long you can hold race pace. So Lindsey, what changes do we expect to see when someone takes on speed training?
I think maybe here we can actually change the use of the terminology and move towards higher intensity training. So higher intensity training brings a lot of positive benefits for middle, long and ultra distance running. Some of those key improvements are neuromuscular. So we are actually training the body and laying down pathways that actually allow the human body to move better and move faster. But we are also looking at physiological adaptation so that we can change how efficiently we work through a different range of intensities and using different metabolic pathways for providing energy. And an example of that might be in a 10K race where you are predominantly using oxidative or aerobic pathways for providing energy, but then you perhaps have 2 or 3 hills that are in that race. And on that hill, we're going to have to dip quite deep into non-oxidative or anaerobic pathways. So we've got this neuromuscular, physical adaptation that we're trying to make, and we're also trying to make physiological adaptations that help us to run more efficiently and supply energy in different types of ways. So in Ntutu, it helps to do different types of high intensity workouts. Why don't you unpack for us what the differences are and when you would use them?
So as Lindsey mentioned, there's going to be a lot of physiological and neuromuscular changes that take place. So you need to hit different zones essentially to target those things. So we look at what we call short intervals. These are intervals that are up to about 600 meters in length. And then we look at mid-length intervals, and these would be up to about 1200 meters, and anything longer than 1200, those are long intervals. And how we think about the intensities, we've got to look at 2 aspects: the physiology, because we're running races that are governed by physiological processes. So we're looking at things around lactate threshold and critical power. Those are important concepts around where you start to drift into maximum intensity performance. And then also looking at things like VO2 max when you're at your maximum performance, and a little bit lower around the aerobic threshold where you're looking at about marathon pace effort. These are all intensities that we can work around and build an athlete's capacity up. We also need to look at races in terms of the actual race distance, because we don't run races of physiology. We run a 5K race, a 10K race, or half marathon. So we can also build your intervals along those parameters of long, short, and medium length intervals around how fast your race needs to be. So we can say if you're running a 5K race, we can build your various paces around that pace to build your economy and your capacity around race pace.
Yeah, and I think if you're training for 5 to 10 kilometers, you're going to have the bulk of your high intensity work is going to be focused on those short intervals.
Exactly.
Of let's say 200 to 600 meters with a little bit of longer stuff involved. And when we move beyond 10Ks and go into half marathon and further, focus that concentration of workouts on the longer end, but then do some stuff on the shorter side for the coordination and for the neuromuscular benefits.
I think that's critical. When you're doing the longer stuff, when you're looking at marathons and even ultra runners, we often neglect the shorter stuff because we assume that you just need to build the capacity. But that neuromuscular coordination is still very, very important for ultra runners and marathon runners.
Yeah, and I think the last thing that I'll touch on around the high intensity is that when we move to, in particular, marathon type of running, we will do what we call sustained efforts. And those will be efforts of 6 minutes or longer, up to 30, 40 minutes sometimes. And those are literally there to drive running economy and to improve your feeling when you are running at marathon pace.
So Lindsey, one thing that we perhaps should look at is this idea of how to structure an interval session or a session like this where you're building in speed. Because often we think it's just about the pace of the session, but we've had interesting conversations about how you can use the rest interval to change the nature of the session. So you talked about using 200-meter intervals and using those to elicit different responses. How would you go about doing that?
Yeah, so this is a fantastic question, Ntutu, because we've just spoken about using short intervals for 5K, but the reality is that if we manipulate the rest interval to give you very little rest, on a 200-meter workout as a great example, if we want to use that 200 to 400-meter workout for a VO2 max type of workout to develop capacity for a 5K, we would give more rest intervals so that we can keep getting back up to that VO2 max effort over and over again and get in some good high volume work at VO2 max because we're giving lots of rest in between. However, if we strip that rest out and say do 200 or 300 meter repeats with 10 to 20 second recoveries, that's almost no recovery. And somebody who ran that workout too hard would probably not even get to halfway through the workout before they were forced to slow right down to almost aerobic levels on the 200. And so you can literally set, I want an athlete to run X intensity, and to ensure that they run at that intensity, we can then just manipulate the rest intervals. But of course, it is often easier to just say, right, when we want to run fast, let's run short. When we want to elicit those threshold or just over threshold workouts, let's rather make it longer. But yeah, that's a really great way of looking at interval workouts.
And I think the beauty of it is it shows that interval workouts are very, very flexible. And you can also accommodate athletes of different abilities. You don't want to start someone who's maybe in their infancy as an athlete and throw them into doing mile repeats. And you can build that aerobic capacity by using short intervals to allow them to actually do the work, because holding on for a mile might be 5 or 6 minutes of running. And if you're a new runner, that's going to be a lot of work. But if you do it in 200s with shorter rest, you're still building the same volume across the session.
Correct. And actually track athletes, pure track athletes, use this to great effect in winter training, because pure track athletes very seldom do lots of road work. And so they actually build aerobic capacity in the winter by doing intervals with very short rests.
So then I suppose the next step is, now that we know how we can structure and build these workouts, how do you work out how fast you're supposed to run in these sessions? Because this is not just an arbitrary pace. You don't go out there and run as hard as you can.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think traditionally the way that I have done this is to use a 5 kilometer time trial and then base the different length of workouts on that. But I think a better way of looking at it is to go, okay, well, what do I want to get out of this workout? So in a traditional sense, I would take average 5K race pace. And if I was doing 1 to 1.2 kilometer repeats, I would look at doing that at somewhere between 3 and 5 seconds per kilometer faster than 5 kilometer pace. If I was doing mid intervals of between 600 to just under 1,000 meters, then I would look at doing between 5 and 8 seconds per kilometer, faster than 5K race pace. And then when we're doing shorter intervals, we look at going around 8 to 15 seconds per kilometer faster than we are going when we do 5K. Now, the beauty of doing it that way is that it puts in a self-limiting injury prevention, because you could do those workouts a lot quicker on some of those distances, but by doing it this way, you are relatively going faster than what for most of us is our fastest distance. So you are improving neuromuscular pathways, you're improving coordination, and we are doing VO2 max workout, so we know we're going into anaerobic work. But as Ntutu and I were discussing earlier, the reality is that we can go, right, today I want to be working on VO2 max, or I actually want to be working on threshold. So I can still do 600 meter repeats at 1,200 meter pace, just faster than VO2 max pace. And I'm going to have to give myself probably a mid-range rest interval of around 90 seconds. As soon as I start pushing myself deeper than that into proper VO2 max work, I need to start shortening, I need to start increasing that recovery cycle, And as soon as I start moving towards threshold, then I can afford to start making that rest interval shorter. So I touched a little bit on injury prevention there, Ntutu, in terms of making sure your workouts are at the appropriate intensity for where you are now, but also for the event that you are training for. What else can we do around injury prevention?
So the important thing about these sessions is that they do take quite a lot out of you. They are very hard on you metabolically. You're working at very, very high intensities, but they're also very hard on you on a muscular level. So the important thing is that you need to take recovery very, very seriously when you do interval sessions. The big mistake I see is people thinking that this is good stuff. And we said this is a very, very powerful way to improve your performance, but too much of something can be detrimental. So what we want you to do is think about not trying to do too many of these sessions in one go. You get a lot of bang for your buck just doing 1 or 2 of these sessions. We can actually argue that most amateurs can get away with doing 1 session a week. And then in between that, the important thing is to then work on the recovery aspect of things. So doing your easy runs at an easy pace. When you get into a period of your training where you're doing interval sessions, you'll find that there will be a limiter on your ability to run fast in your easy days. So don't try and force through that. Allow yourself to run easy and recover before you do other stuff. You still have to do strength training, and long runs are still going to be part of your program. So you need to ensure that you are fully recovering in between your workouts. These are some of the hardest workouts you will do as an athlete.
Oh, absolutely. And the human body has an enormous capacity to do work and to improve to do more work. But we've got to do it in stages, and we've got to let ourselves recover from that effort so that the body then improves. And I really am a big believer in amateur athletes that have lots of external commitments getting plenty of benefit from doing 1 speed work session per week. And I think your body has to be ready to accept that level of work. And that really means laying the foundation. I mean, we always use the example of building a house. You cannot build a house unless you put down solid foundations, or you can build a house, but at the first sign of nature giving you trouble, that house is done for. And speed work is exactly the same. Spend 4, 6, 8 weeks, if you can, really laying an aerobic foundation before you introduce interval workouts, and then build your interval workouts over a period of time. 10 to 12 weeks is really a nice amount of time going into any distance workout to get a true peak performance when you get to that workout. So if we add all that up together, we're really looking at between 12 and 20 weeks to elicit the best performance out of you, particularly when we go above 10 kilometers. And this is why high intensity training helps people to improve their running performance. It really is a foolproof method, guaranteed to give you results. There is, though, one other thing that will really help you get stronger and make sure that you smash your goals. And if you don't address it, you are most likely going to pick up an injury. So go check out this video and make sure that you do not make this mistake.